Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The verse John 1:1, which states, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God," is a verse that Christians use most of the time to prove the divinity of Jesus Christ. When we ask them to give a verse that will show that Jesus is divine, they will usually use this verse, John 1:1. So how can we as Muslims refute this verse? Well, it's very simple. One must question the authorship of the book of John, the Gospel of John, because the Christian scholars themselves, they are in dispute over who is John, because at that time John was a very common name and many people were called John. So we don't really know who John is. Some say he was an eyewitness account to Jesus. Some say it was written about 4 centuries later after Jesus' death. So therefore, if we do not know who John is, how can we use his gospel as a reliable source? Now, having said that, we must know how to accurately question the authorship of John, and there are a few ways to do that. Number one, we can take one of the opinions put forward, which states that it was John the disciple who wrote this gospel. But then he had a student called Papias, and this student never once quoted the Gospel of John. Why wouldn't if the Gospel of John was an eyewitness account to Jesus' life, therefore something which has a writing which has the most authority, why would his student not once quote that? Therefore, was it really John the disciple who wrote this gospel? Another way we can question it is by looking at John chapter 20 verse 3, which says the gospel was written by the disciple whom Christ loved. But then if we look at John chapter 11 verse 3, the disciple whom Christ loved is identified as Lazarus. So what's happening there? Did Lazarus write this, or what's happening? That way, was the gospel really written by John? Which John was written by? Once again comes into question. One last way we can question this is among the 4 gospels we have obviously John, then we have Matthew, Mark and Luke. And Matthew, Mark and Luke, because of how similar they are called the synoptics, and that is because of how much similar information they have. Whereas John, he contradicts a lot of the stuff that is said in the synoptics. For example, Jesus' ministry. The synoptics, they say it lasted only about a year, while John has Jesus ministering between 2 and 3 years. Another contradiction is that in John's gospel, Jesus knew Jerusalem well and had traveled there 3 or 4 times, whereas in the synoptics, Jesus visits Jerusalem only once. So therefore, we must question which one is more reliable. If it's John, then we must say Matthew, Mark and Luke are inaccurate, and they are, why are we then using those 3 also? But if we say that Matthew, Mark and Luke, the synoptics, they are more accurate, then therefore we cannot use John as a reliable source. And since we don't really know who the author is, from a historical point of view, it is more plausible to say that Matthew, Mark and Luke are more accurate, because we know who they are and how they got their information, whereas we don't know for John who he was exactly and how he got his information. Therefore, by questioning the authorship of John, we can falsify the claim made by the Christians that John 1:1 proves the divinity of Jesus Christ. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.